Ambassador Zelnari of the triumphant hegemony smoothed his iridescent ceremonial plumage as their diplomatic shuttle glided toward the primitive backwater world designated Earth. His three compound eyes glittered with barely concealed condescension. After 8 centuries of methodical expansion across 17 star systems, absorbing dozens of lesser civilizations, they had finally encountered another species that had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel. The keyword being stumbled. "Ambassador," his aide Crixton chirped nervously, adjusting the sensor array, "the humans have agreed to conduct first-contact negotiations at their primary orbital facility. Our intelligence division reports they achieved rudimentary FTL capability merely 50 standard cycles ago." Zelnari's razor-sharp mandibles clicked in condescending amusement. 50 cycles? By the eternal throne, we were constructing continent-sized battle stations and subduing entire sectors when these hairless primates were still banging rocks together around campfires. This diplomatic mission should prove refreshingly simple. Through the shuttle's reinforced viewports, Earth's primary space station gradually materialized. A laughably modest ring of welded metal plates and transparent aluminum spinning with quaint simplicity in the planet's orbit. Zelnari noted with scientific interest that their entire advanced station was smaller than the hegemony's standard diplomatic courier vessels. As their shuttle smoothly docked with the primitive facility, Zelnari mentally composed his preliminary report to the High Council. These humans would obviously require extensive guidance and cultural restructuring. Perhaps they could serve effectively as manual laborers in the hegemony's outer mining colonies, or possibly as agricultural workers on the food production worlds. Their underdeveloped neural capacity would certainly limit their usefulness in any sophisticated endeavors. The docking bay's airlock cycled with a crude mechanical hiss, and Zelnari stepped through with practiced diplomatic grace. 3 humans awaited him, 2 wearing what appeared to be primitive military uniforms decorated with colorful fabric patches, and 1 in simple civilian attire. "Welcome to Harmony Station, Ambassador," the civilian said warmly, extending one appendage in what Zelnari recognized as their species' greeting gesture. "I'm Secretary Chen of the United Earth Government. We're truly honored by your visit to our system." Honored? How delightfully, charmingly naive these creatures were. The preliminary negotiations unfolded exactly as Zelnari had anticipated in his most optimistic projections. The humans displayed textbook pre-galactic civilization behavior, excessive eagerness to please, desperate hunger for any advanced technology the hegemony might graciously provide, and that endearing combination of curiosity and ignorance that marked all primitive species encountering their galactic superiors for the first time. Secretary Chen leaned forward across the conference table, his primitive recording devices whirring softly. "We genuinely appreciate your interest in establishing formal trade agreements, Ambassador. Your technological advances could revolutionize our agricultural efficiency and medical capabilities. However, we'd like to understand more about your military doctrine and fleet capabilities, purely for defensive planning purposes, you understand." Zelnari's aide, Crixton, practically vibrated with barely contained excitement at this golden opportunity. His feathered crest flushed bright orange with enthusiasm. "Oh, Secretary Chen, you absolutely must witness our battle fleet in action. The humans would be utterly fascinated by our superior engineering achievements and tactical innovations. It would be educational beyond measure." Perfect. A carefully orchestrated demonstration would definitively establish the proper power dynamic and eliminate any future misunderstandings about their respective positions in the galactic hierarchy. "An excellent suggestion, young Crixton." Zelnari agreed with calculated smoothness, his tone dripping with diplomatic magnanimity. "Perhaps tomorrow morning we could arrange a modest display of our peaceful intentions and defensive capabilities. Nothing too overwhelming for your sensors, naturally." The three humans exchanged meaningful glances, some peculiar emotional communication Zelnari couldn't quite decipher flickering rapidly across their strangely mobile features. Admiral Torres, the female in military dress, finally responded after an extended pause. "That would be very educational indeed, Ambassador. We look forward to the demonstration with considerable interest." That evening, as Zelnari settled into his rest cycle aboard their shuttle, he dictated a preliminary assessment to the Hegemony High Council. Initial contact proceeds according to standard protocols. Humans exhibit typical pre-galactic civilization characteristics: insatiable curiosity, laughably primitive technology, and appropriately deferential behavior toward obviously superior species. Recommend implementing standard cultural integration procedures immediately following tomorrow's fleet demonstration. How catastrophically, spectacularly wrong his assumptions would prove to be. The following morning, Zelnari positioned himself regally at the observation deck's primary viewpoint, his ceremonial robes flowing magnificently as he watched with profound satisfaction. The Hegemony's carefully selected demonstration fleet emerged from hyperspace with textbook precision. 12 vessels arranged in an absolutely perfect combat formation that would have made the Naval Academy instructors weep with pride. Each ship represented the pinnacle of Hegemony engineering excellence. The smallest vessels were heavy cruisers, each one significantly larger than anything currently visible in Earth's primitive orbital infrastructure. But dominating the center of the formation like a predatory leviathan, the absolute pride of their civilization, the battleship Inevitable Glory, stretching 3 magnificent kilometers of armored perfection, bristling with enough weaponry to reduce entire continents to molten slag. "Quite impressive," Admiral Torres commented from beside him, though her vocal tone seemed oddly detached, almost clinical. "These magnificent vessels represent merely a fraction of our peaceful exploration fleet," Zelnari explained with calculated magnanimity, gesturing toward the display with obvious pride. "The Inevitable Glory alone carries sufficient firepower to completely sterilize a planetary surface. Of course," he added with diplomatic precision, "the Hegemony firmly believes in pursuing diplomatic solutions whenever reasonably possible." Secretary Chen nodded thoughtfully, studying the formation through his primitive optical instruments. "Yes, quite an impressive demonstration of your capabilities. Admiral Torres, perhaps we should extend the same professional courtesy to our guests." The Admiral's facial expression shifted into what humans apparently called a smile, a peculiar arrangement of features that made Zelnari's skin crawl with inexplicable unease for reasons he couldn't rationally identify. "Excellent suggestion, Secretary," Torres replied with obvious satisfaction. "I'll transmit the authorization signal immediately." Within mere moments, the space surrounding Earth began to shimmer with an almost ethereal quality. Zelnari watched in rapidly growing confusion and mounting horror as human vessels materialized from what he had confidently assumed was completely empty vacuum. Not just a handful of ships, dozens upon dozens, then hundreds, then thousands upon thousands of vessels appearing like ghosts materializing from another dimension. Ship after ship decloaked from advanced stealth systems, revealing themselves in precise defensive formations that stretched from Earth's atmosphere all the way to Luna's orbital path. "What? What is this?" Crixton stammered, his voice climbing several octaves as his scanning equipment began frantically recalibrating to accommodate the impossible readings flooding his sensors. "Oh, that?" Admiral Torres replied with casual indifference, as if discussing the weather patterns on a peaceful agricultural world. "Just our standard home defense fleet. We've been discreetly monitoring your approach vector for the past 3 weeks, naturally. Standard protocols required us to verify your peaceful intentions before revealing our defensive positions." Zelnari's 3 compound eyes darted desperately across the viewports, unable to focus on any single point as his mind struggled to process the overwhelming scope of what he was witnessing. The sheer numerical superiority was staggering. Thousands upon thousands of vessels materialized in mathematically perfect defensive formations that demonstrated tactical sophistication beyond anything in hegemony military doctrine. Your home defense fleet? Zelnari's voice emerged as barely a whisper, his vocal cords constricting with shock. Just our local patrol units, really, Secretary Chen explained with diplomatic politeness, consulting a handheld device with practiced efficiency. We didn't want to appear unnecessarily aggressive during first contact by maintaining full defensive visibility. Most of our primary fleet assets are currently deployed on deep space exploration missions throughout the outer galactic arms. Crixton was frantically manipulating his sensor array, his feathered crest now pale with terror. "Sir," he whispered urgently, his voice trembling with disbelief, "preliminary scans indicate over 12,000 individual vessels. And these energy signatures, some of these ships are generating power readings that exceed our theoretical maximums." Admiral Torres noticed their obvious distress with apparent concern. "Though, you're particularly interested in our heavy units. Computer, please highlight all Dreadnought-class vessels for our guests' educational benefit." Instantaneously, precisely 12 massive vessels illuminated across the vast defensive grid, their running lights creating brilliant constellation patterns against the cosmic darkness. Even at extreme distances, their incredible scale was immediately apparent. Each individual ship dwarfed the mighty inevitable glory like an ancient whale compared to a minnow. "Those are our older Titan-class dreadnoughts," Torres explained conversationally, as if discussing vintage transportation. "We've been considering retiring them to reserve status, but they remain quite useful for routine patrol duties. Our newer ship classes are all deployed on extended deep space missions." Crixton was frantically manipulating his sensor array, his feathered crest now pale with terror. "Sir," he whispered urgently, his voice trembling with disbelief, "preliminary scans indicate over 12,000 individual vessels. And these energy signatures, some of these ships are generating power readings that exceed our theoretical maximums." Admiral Torres noticed their obvious distress with apparent concern. "Oh, you're particularly interested in our heavy units? Computer, please highlight all Dreadnought-class vessels for our guests' educational benefit." Instantaneously, precisely 12 massive vessels illuminated across the vast defensive grid, their running lights creating brilliant constellation patterns against the cosmic darkness. Even at extreme distances, their incredible scale was immediately apparent. Each individual ship dwarfed the mighty inevitable glory like an ancient whale compared to a minnow. "Those are our older Titan-class dreadnoughts," Torres explained conversationally, as if discussing vintage transportation. "We've been considering retiring them to reserve status, but they remain quite useful for routine patrol duties. Our newer ship classes are all deployed on extended deep space missions." The primary shuttle bay of the human dreadnought Harmony's Edge defied every concept of scale that Zelnari had previously considered possible. The cavernous hangar could have easily accommodated the entire inevitable glory with room to spare for several escort frigates. Atmospheric processors hummed with quiet efficiency, while automated loading systems moved cargo containers the size of small buildings with mechanical precision. Zelnari walked in stunned, contemplative silence as Admiral Torres guided them through corridors that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon, pointing out various operational features with casual professional pride. "This vessel functions essentially as a completely self-sufficient mobile city," Torres explained matter-of-factly. "Standard crew complement of approximately 50,000 personnel, though most critical functions are fully automated. We can operate independently in deep space for several decades without requiring any external resupply. 50,000 crew members aboard a single vessel. The entire hegemony navy maintained perhaps 1 million personnel across all ships, stations, and planetary installations combined. As they traversed seemingly endless corridors lined with advanced displays and monitoring systems, Zelnari noticed something profoundly unsettling. The humans weren't attempting to impress their guests. Torres discussed their overwhelming capabilities with the same casual professionalism one might use when describing routine weather patterns. There was no boastful pride, no theatrical demonstrations of superiority, just clinical facts delivered with matter-of-fact precision. "Your primary weapon systems," Zelnari finally managed to ask, his voice barely audible above the ambient hum of advanced machinery. "What are their operational capabilities?" Torres paused beside a massive blast door adorned with multilingual warning symbols in scripts Zelnari couldn't recognize. "Well, our main batteries can fracture a planetary satellite, if that answers your question, though we strongly prefer surgical precision strikes. Here, let me demonstrate our point defense grid systems." The armory they entered transcended rational comprehension. Weapon systems lined the reinforced walls in perfect geometric rows, each individual unit larger and more sophisticated than the primary guns mounted on hegemony heavy cruisers. Of course, these are primarily designed for neutralizing asteroids and space debris, Torres mentioned with casual indifference. Our actual offensive weapons are stored in significantly more secure locations throughout the vessel. Crixton was hyperventilating, a feat Zelnari hadn't thought possible for their species. "Sir," he wheezed, "their point defense systems have more firepower than our fleet's main batteries." Torres overheard and looked concerned. "Oh, is your aide feeling unwell? The artificial gravity can take some getting used to. Should we head to medical?" The genuine concern in her voice was almost worse than contempt would have been. These humans hadn't built this fleet to threaten anyone. They'd built it because they could, because it was simply how they approached problems, with overwhelming, methodical thoroughness. Crixton collapsed into hyperventilation, a physiological response Zelnari had never witnessed in their species before. His aide's respiratory system struggled desperately against the overwhelming psychological shock. "Sir," he wheezed through labored breathing, "their secondary point defense systems generate more concentrated firepower than our entire battle fleet's primary weapon batteries combined." Torres immediately noticed Crixton's distress, and her expression shifted to genuine medical concern. "Oh dear, is your aide experiencing physiological difficulties? Our artificial gravity generators can require adjustment periods for different species. Should we escort him to our medical bay for examination?" The sincere worry in her voice proved almost more devastating than contempt would have been. These humans hadn't constructed this incomprehensible fleet to threaten neighboring civilizations. They'd built it because such construction represented their natural, methodical approach to problem-solving, with overwhelming, systematic thoroughness that defied rational limitation. Back in his cramped quarters aboard the Hegemony shuttle, Zelnari stared at his preliminary diplomatic report and systematically deleted every single carefully crafted word. How could he possibly communicate this impossible reality to the High Council? What language existed to describe such overwhelming superiority? A soft, melodic chime indicated an incoming priority transmission from Admiral Torres. "Ambassador, we've received communications that several of our deep space exploration fleets are returning to Sol system for scheduled resupply operations. We thought you might find it educational to observe standard fleet movements." Zelnari's mandibles clicked with nervous anticipation. "How many vessels are we discussing?" "Oh, just 3 standard exploration groups. The Centauri Scientific Expedition, the Vega Astronomical Survey Fleet, and Admiral Chen's Deep Space Patrol Division. Perhaps 15,000 ships total, nothing too dramatic." 15,000 ships, described as nothing too dramatic. The following hours dissolved into a surreal nightmare of impossible demonstrations. Fleet after massive fleet emerged from hyperspace with military precision that transformed hegemony formations into amateur exercises performed by enthusiastic children. Ship classifications Zelnari had never imagined materialized before his sensors. Some vessels so monumentally massive they generated their own measurable gravitational fields. That magnificent vessel is the New Geneva, Torres indicated with casual professional pride, our newest deep space exploration ship. She measures approximately 30 kilometers in length, specifically designed for century-long scientific missions into uncharted galactic regions. Exploration vessel, Zelnari repeated in barely audible amazement. Scientific research, more precisely, though she maintains a full marine expeditionary division for security purposes. You simply cannot exercise excessive caution in completely unexplored space territories. Secretary Chen materialized beside them on the observation deck, his expression radiating diplomatic warmth. Ambassador, we've been extensively discussing your comprehensive trade proposals. We're genuinely fascinated by the prospect of cultural exchange, though I must honestly admit we don't have any pressing technological requirements your civilization could fulfill. Zelnari nodded with numb acceptance. Of course they possessed no useful technology. However, Chen continued with obvious enthusiasm, we would absolutely treasure the opportunity to learn about your artistic traditions, your literary masterpieces, your musical compositions, your philosophical frameworks. We find cultural diversity utterly fascinating and intellectually enriching. And there it was, the crushing, humbling revelation. The humans possessed zero interest in conquest, territorial expansion, or political domination. They were interested in genuine friendship. Despite commanding sufficient firepower to reduce the entire hegemony to scattered cosmic debris, they wanted to exchange poetry collections and artistic paintings. Zelnari's final diplomatic report to the Hegemony High Council bore absolutely no resemblance to his original intentions. Honored counselors, I must regretfully inform you that our preliminary assessment of humanity was catastrophically, fundamentally incorrect. They are not a primitive species requiring guidance. They represent the most militarily advanced civilization we have encountered in recorded galactic history. However, this communication does not constitute a threat assessment. Humanity has achieved something genuinely unprecedented. They have evolved into apex predators who consciously choose to function as galactic gardeners. Their overwhelming military capabilities exist not for aggressive conquest, but for protective purposes, defending themselves, their established allies, and apparently any civilization requiring assistance. They have graciously offered us complete membership in their galactic community, an interstellar organization we had never encountered because we were too preoccupied conquering neighboring systems to notice the dozens of species already trading peacefully, sharing technological advances, and exploring the galaxy together under human protection. I strongly recommend immediate acceptance of their generous offer, not because we fear their superior power, but because we could learn something infinitely more valuable than technology from these remarkable beings. We could discover what true civilization actually means. The humans were never impressed by our battleships because they understand what genuine strength represents, and it bears no relationship to weapon specifications. With profound respect and newfound humility, Ambassador Zelnari. 3 months later, the first Hegemony cultural exchange students arrived on Earth to study human philosophy, art, and ethics. Admiral Torres personally welcomed them at the spaceport, her smile radiating authentic warmth. "Welcome to Earth," she said sincerely. "We're incredibly glad you decided to join our community." Behind her, barely visible in orbital positions, the human defense fleet continued its silent vigil over all inhabitants of the solar system, protectors who had chosen peace as their ultimate weapon. I strongly recommend immediate acceptance of their generous offer, not because we fear their superior power, but because we could learn something infinitely more valuable than technology from these remarkable beings. We could discover what true civilization actually means. The humans were never impressed by our battleships because they understand what genuine strength represents, and it bears no relationship to weapon specifications. With profound respect and newfound humility, Ambassador Zelnari.